for the Impact of Space Transforming Business session. This is the right one. You're in the right room. I see a few people walking past. My name is Byron Riessen. I'm a partner at Deloitte Space. Before we commence, I just would like to acknowledge the country that we are meeting on this afternoon, the land of the Kaurna people, and pay my respects to elders past and present. We're in for a great session this afternoon. We're very privileged to have three fantastic leaders from BHP, ElectraNet and RAA. You will all know the BHP brand name. You'll hear more about these brands a bit further, but ElectraNet, high voltage electricity transmission for this state. But for those of you, for example, from New South Wales or ACT, think equivalent of Transgrid, for example. But so we'll hear from ElectraNet, and then RAA's in the motor club sector. But there's a lot of transformation going on with the Royal Automobile Association. So we'll hear from the RAA as well. So we've got Katie Hulmes, who's in the middle. She's our head of innovation ecosystems for BHP. Frank, who's from ElectraNet, manager of asset information, and then Ben Owen. He wears two titles: general manager of home and energy, but also is the chief strategy officer for the RAA. So thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Just to set the context a little bit further, this session allows us to focus on the impact of space and geospatial on the end user sectors and organisations that most of you are seeking to serve. And just to give you a bit of context, Deloitte did some global research in partnership with the World Economic Forum just over the last year. And I haven't pulled out all the stats, but there is Earth observation, so just part of the space economy, is forecast to unlock potentially up to $700 billion in global economic value between now and 2030. And this time frame of 2030 is a really interesting one, because we've had impact from this part of space capability for many years, but there is so much innovation and tech transformation going on in space, and things that many of you are familiar with, whether it be the dramatically lower costs of getting into space, the frequency of getting into space, the capability and the sensors, if we think through the resolution, the passover rates, the ability to integrate space data more easily. And we're almost shifting from best efforts to the language of service level agreements and dependability and reliability. So there's quite a few changes going on that are behind these stats. I haven't broken out the Australian numbers, and whilst agriculture here in Australia is at the top of the pile for economic impact, I've left that stat out because I've pulled out the ones that are focused on the sectors that our panellists are representing this afternoon. So mining, oil and gas, 108 billion, electricity and utilities, 47 billion, supply chain and transport, 35 billion, and insurance and financial services. And while there's a bit of change going on in RAA, there's some pretty big numbers, even when we sort of pro-rata it down, if you like, to or ratio it down for the Australian economy. But rather than me talk to you about big numbers that are hard to get our heads around, what we're going to do this afternoon is hear more about these organisations. And the way it'll work, I've asked Frank, Katie and Ben to introduce themselves, their organisation, about what they do and what makes them different, something about their challenges, but also to start to introduce the context of why our sector is important, either today for them or perhaps emerging into the future. And then we'll have a panel conversation. We've prepared a few areas where we want to go with the conversation, so I'll lead that for a while. And then towards the end of the session, open mic, in the sense that we'd love to hear some questions from you. So start preparing your questions now. So we'll leave it at that right now, but I think to start off with, we've got Katie first off, Katie Hulmes. So I will put the clicker up there for you, Katie. When you're done, I'll get you to sort of get the clicker ready for our Thanks, Katie. Can you just join me in welcoming Katie?
Thank you very much. The hardest thing at any conference is working a clicker, so I can guarantee that we're probably in for a treat. My name's Katie Hulmes. I've been with BHP for a couple of years now, but I'm a long-term South Australian resident. I was with the Oz Minerals business for 18 years before that, so this is home for me. And it is great to be back here speaking in South Australia. I'm very fortunate to lead a global team, and I've actually spent the last 24 months predominantly through Latin America and the United States at the intersection of technology development between other sectors and the mining sector. And one of those sectors has been the space sector. So I'm a very passionate advocate for technology transfer from the space sector. So it is great to see everyone here in South Australia. I don't want to assume that you know everything about BHP, but obviously BHP is a global mining house. We do focus on the commodities of copper, potash, and iron ore. We did have nickel in our portfolio here in Australia, but you would have seen that we have got that on hold at the moment. Predominantly for us, our growth market is copper, and that talks a lot to where there's some transferability in terms of opportunities between different sectors, whether it be automotive, mining, space and mining, or even agriculture and mining. There's a lot of opportunity as a result of copper being the growth commodity of choice. I'm very fortunate to lead a brand in BHP called Think and Act Differently. And really the truth of it is for us to actually embrace technology and to create new value for organisations, that's exactly what we have to do. We have to think and act differently. And we have to be willing to listen to those around us, how they're approaching problems, how they are finding solutions, how they network with each other, how they build their supply chains. And then we have to think about how we can take action differently. And most importantly, we need to think about how we can do that with the people that are most important in all of our businesses. So as the innovation group, we try and build a really diverse group of organisations. We try and take a systems approach to technology. So rather than just looking at the technology itself, we try and look at what is the ecosystem around that needs to be active. How do you build it, sell it, maintain it, grow it, all of those things that come to actually develop sustainable technologies. And then how do we make sure that they're resilient into our long-term business structure? In the last 12 months, I never get the financial years right. We'll just go with 12 months on that slide. But we were very fortunate to connect with nearly 4,000 different companies globally, all who are developing technologies. And we had nearly 2,000 of those companies register into our formal ecosystem with Think and Act Differently to be a part of our ongoing dialogue and to participate in BHP's growing interest in technology development and translation. We've actually directly evaluated with technical specialists in our business 370 individual technologies to find out how they could be directly applied, and 116 of those have gone through into shortlisted applications and are in flight and operating across BHP, which is a fantastic amount of effort from the ecosystem over the last 12 months. Just really honing in on space, I think we talk a lot about space and data transfer and satellite communications and all of those kinds of things, but if I'm really going to dig into anything today, the areas that I'm most interested in terms of where BHP is looking at the transfer for tech here is actually in automation and robotics. We spend a lot of time, money and effort designing our mines, trialling technologies, building pilot sites, testing things. But at the end of the day, we know in the space sector, you get one chance. You've got to get it up, you've got to run it. And so how do you actually build those technologies, have confidence in those technologies and be able to deploy those? But also into what is largely similar hostile environments. So we're at depth, high heat, often kilometres underground, dealing with acidic waters out of rocks, all sorts of things. You know, the harsh environment's very similar. And we've also spent a lot of time with the team at NASA Ames last year looking at the in-situ resource utilisation programs coming out of the US in terms of what we're going to do with metals in space. So for us to have an opportunity to think about how can we transfer knowledge that we have about understanding minerals and mineral processing, but how we're then going to do that in a modular, miniature, small environment in, again, those hostile environments is a really great challenge and something that we think the sectors can learn greatly from each other. One last slide, just to dig in that slight little bit deeper. We do have some really great examples that are starting to come through. You can almost chase anything in terms of whether it's our LiDAR systems, our drone systems, any of those things that we're deploying on a daily basis. A lot of those have an underpinning of technology developed in the space sector. So I wouldn't underestimate what are the on-Earth applications. I love getting to say I'm an on-Earth engineer because that's just kind of makes me sound cool, even though off-Earth is probably cooler, but I never thought of myself as an on-Earth engineer. But there's so many on-Earth applications, and so particularly one of the biggest things we find is the space economy is quite a way away to be at scale for you to actually grow your organisation. So don't overlook us as a near-term market play, somewhere where you may be able to create that short-term revenue, get back to those investors we've all got, and try and think about how we create those markets for technologies and scale them off Earth. And then, of course, life support systems. We still need to send people underground. Our underground miners might not have the social profile of an astronaut. However, they are still exposed to conditions that certainly need to rely on some of those life-saving and health management systems that we do invest in space so heavily for our astronauts. And I'd encourage us to think about applications on Earth for those as well. So that's a bit about us.
Thank you very much, Katie. So our next scene setter will come from Ben Owen, who I introduced before, but Ben is the GM of Home and Energy, as well as the head of strategy, the Chief Strategy Officer for the RAA. Welcome, Ben.
Thanks, Byron. Thanks, Katie. So, good afternoon, and thanks for having me. I'm, as mentioned before, the Chief Strategy Officer. I think I'll put a bit of context to RAA because it's not always that well known, but we're a mutual organisation, a little bit different to BHP and others. So being a mutual, we're a member-based organisation, and we've been in place for 120 years. We have 830,000 plus members in South Australia, so a significant number of South Australians are with us. We get you at birth pretty much, and they stay with us, which is good. And we've been best known for our roadside assistance. Who's used roadside before? Yeah, everyone pretty much has. But over time, we've really grown our business into becoming a lot more focused, not just on roadside, but into mobility, into energy, into insurance, and we're actually one of the oldest travel service providers in South Australia. We've been doing that for over 60 years as well. So there's lots of things we do that people aren't fully across, but we are deeply embedded into South Australia, and we play a critical role in regional and remote communities as well. So I'll just go back to this, because I think this really is an interesting slide, in that the context here for us is that we've been founded by innovators. We were founded by 14 pioneers in the automobile area when the car was the new technology of the time. And so a lot of people don't know that fully. But in the time, for cars to travel, there was a need to actually have enough fuel, like there is today with EVs and everything else. So range anxiety was something we were solving 120 years ago, and that's how we were founded. And we're doing that now with our EV rollout. And so we have 140 different stations and charge points that span really across the entire state. So both in metropolitan, but also into the remote and regional areas where there's not a lot of network. And so from Eyre Peninsula to Riverland and Limestone Coast, you'll find these sites. And these sites are really about enabling not just, the energy transition, but they're also about providing regional tourism, creating certainty, and ensuring our members, no matter where they live, don't get left behind in the energy transition. So when I joined RAA, it was about 3 years ago, or just under 3 years ago, and there was a 62-page document, Simone will probably remember it, on our strategy. We now have strategy on a page, and that's something that we've developed, and we've got very focused on where we play and how we operate. And you may have even seen, we recently divested out our underwriting insurance part of our business to Allianz. That's part of us becoming very focused on strategic partnerships and where we can add value to the core areas of our business, which is around brand, distribution, and delivering great services for our members. So in that context, I'll sort of just talk a little bit about how we play into the space area, and also more broadly, how we're transforming our capabilities. So as I mentioned, RAA, complex consumer sectors we play in, being mobility, energy and insurance. We deliver 700,000 roadside call-outs per year. We install thousands of solar and battery systems, and we run a 24/7 call centre, right? So there's some of the things that we're doing, and we're supporting members in vast geographical distances. So what that will mean is we've got significant operational complexity and data and indirectly or directly, the data that is coming through space technologies actually plays a significant role in how we will see ourselves in the future and how we'll actually mobilise around a number of different challenges that our members deal with. So we're managing large fleets, we're dealing with variable terrains, we're dealing with a whole raft of different things. So what I would call out, and we'll get into the panel more broadly, is RA is also part of a global mobility alliance mechanism and also part of the FIA. So a lot of clubs globally are looking at the ways that they can improve mobility in different services. And so I will no doubt touch on drones and other things that we're doing and have been involved in. And we'll talk a bit more about that. Stuff that you don't necessarily see when you chat to the roadside guys coming out to fix your battery. But there's things going on behind the scenes that you may not be aware of. What I'll sort of go to here is just really that REA is set around performance for purpose. That's our mission. And the performance for purpose is really about delivering right now in today so that we can provide new services and emerging services to our members into the future. Our areas are really focused around two parallel models, and I think when you think about it, there's nothing more definitive in the two parallel models we're operating right now with looking after internal combustion engines and all the things that are required there for our members that are going to not necessarily buy EVs and the like, but also at the same time having the EV infrastructure and the largest density infrastructure anywhere in Australia to support that EV rollout and the adoption and ensuring that we've got that demand covered. So role of geospatial and space-based technologies that we can see emerging for us is the road safety analysis. REA plays a massive advocacy part into government. And so for us, understanding what's going on the roads, where there's infrastructure requirements, where there's need for road improvement, having all that geospatial data capability, understanding where people are travelling, and also, as EV adoption picks up, knowing where the demand is going to be at different points in corridor and noting that where cars and vehicles will be travelling as they become more connected is something that we're certainly very interested in. And all, to be fair with you, all mobility clubs around the world are looking in that space. And then in terms of the other areas that I'll sort of just touch on real quick, is real-time satellite imagery and weather overlays. We're very interested in understanding the patterns and how that operates. And while REA isn't currently there, our categories, as mentioned before, around mobility, insurance, travel, home energy and community, we have a very big part to play in community. And part of what we want to do is make our regional communities and our metropolitan communities safer and care for South Australians in many different ways. And some of that is looking at potentially getting into coastal areas as well. So coastal monitoring, boat, we could be there in a different type of way into the future. We know that there's a few choppers that look after people and monitor for sharks and different things. It may be one day that's RA drones doing some of that activity as well, potentially. And when you think about coastal monitoring, particularly with the algae bloom and the like, there's areas where we could play a different type of role for the community and enrich the community in different ways. We're a member organisation, so money that we receive through different areas through our divestment in our insurance, we want to be able to give back to communities in different ways. And for us, some of that's about keeping South Australians safe and getting them to the destinations they want to go to. On that note, it's obviously very complex. There's lots of different complexities around bringing all these different technologies into play. We operate, like everyone, with legacy systems, and we've got side-by-side cloud-based systems, so we have different tech architecture and different stacks. So how we ingest data is really important, and how we can then use that in ways that matter to our members is something that we're certainly very keen to continue to pursue. On that note, I will wrap up, and I'm now going to pass over to Frank. But if you want to do your introduction, no, okay. All right, no worries. Cheers, thanks, guys.
All right, so Frank Maio. I actually work in the assets division at ElectraNet. So, the classic asset life cycle is plan, build and run assets. So most of the data that my team looks after is around the asset information itself. I've been with ElectraNet now for 27 years. That's pretty rare. But the great thing about that is I've been able to move around the organisation quite a bit. So just a bit about ElectraNet. Let me get the right button. Good. So ElectraNet, we're pretty much we sit between the major generators and I guess the distribution network here in South Australia, who are SA Power Networks. So our role very much is about getting the bulk generation from the generators and passing it on to the low power or the medium to low power network here in South Australia. Just in regards to assets, we are privately owned, which is becoming pretty common in our industry. We do cover quite a big region in South Australia, so 200,000 square kilometres, all the way from, and I do have a spatial map on that, all the way from down the southeast, all the way up to BHP and to Port Lincoln as well. So it's quite a large network, I guess the unique thing with South Australia as well, we have a smaller population than most other states, but the network's just as big. So the challenge for us is, how do we keep those costs down? How do we, especially when we're trying to maintain such a vast network here in South Australia. One thing that has changed quite a bit with our network, when I first started, all our generators were either coal or gas. There was a little bit of oil. I think Torrens Island could run on oil at that time, but that was it. And the amount of generation coming online was fairly limited. We had a lot of time to prepare for it. Things weren't changing too often. And even our customers, I remember BHP's, I think, always been one of our major customers. So, and even at the time, they were looking at a bit of a growth spurt back in the early or the late 1990s as well. But I guess what's happened recently, obviously, we've spoken quite a bit about the energy transition. We're constantly now being bombarded with connection inquiries. So whether that be wind farms, solar farms, batteries, big batteries. I think just in the next 10 years alone, there's a good chance we could easily double the amount of connections we have on our network, just purely with the amount of renewable generation coming online, which is a great thing for the state. Obviously, the transition is happening very quickly here, thank you. But yeah, it is a challenge for us around how do we make sure we've got sufficient data that we can respond to those inquiries as quickly as possible. That's just in the planning area, let alone the operations area around how do we keep our people safe and when we're travelling out there, and also how do we get good forecasting information as well when things happen. So an interesting thing about South Australia, so when we talk about bulk energy supply systems, South Australia is leading the world at the moment. In regards to a country, yes, we're still fairly low, but just in South Australia as a state, we've 74%, as you can see there, of our generation. I think this was, annual generation is 74%. And when we talk about renewable generation, some people don't understand it. It's really variable renewable energy, which means it's solar, it's wind, it's stuff that is very hard to control, and it's very dependent on what the weather is out there. Is the sun shining, is the wind blowing, and it's constantly changing. So for our network, it's how do we meet those challenges? How do we get good forecasting systems in place so that way we can make sure our network's as highly available as possible. I was a bit quicker. So
That's fantastic. Brilliant. Welcome. Well done, Frank. Testing. You did me a favour there, Frank. We needed to reclaim a bit of time, so that's great. So we're going to have sort of 10, 15 minutes of sort of conversation here on the stage. So let me be a little bit self-indulgent with our panellists, but we will then open it up to questions from all of you. So, but just to kick it off, I'll go to Frank. You've just been presenting, but we've just seen a great perspective of leadership. There's South Australia leading the world in energy transition, in this transition to renewables, but the complexity of that is not only the variable types of energy, but this this spread out network, the low population density. So to me, there's complexity, and where there's complexity, there's risk. So do you want to just unpack what's it like from an asset management point of view, and in the context of risk, particularly regional remote risks, because I think they are the triggers for the sort of capability that this audience represents too. So, question on risk there.
So look, just in regards to, a good talk about the asset life cycle. So just from a planning perspective alone, there's so much information that now that our field people need to be aware of. Whether that be who our landowners are. So also I guess the thing with ElectraNet, majority of our assets don't sit on our land, it sits on other people's land. So whether that be our traditional landowners, so things around cultural heritage, whether that be farmers and other landowners. So I guess the more information we have available at their fingertips, the better decisions they can make out in the field. And that's in the planning area. And then also when we start building stuff as well, how do we make sure we're just the vegetation alone that that our field crew are moving across. How do we keep them safe? How do we make sure we're giving them good warning around where are the issues around whether it be flooding zones or access tracks. So a lot of our access tracks are on other people's land. So how do we make sure we're constantly updating our information to know has someone modified some our access tracks? Has there been some degradation in some of those access tracks as well? So again, this is where I guess we're constantly looking at new ways to bring more timely and more accurate information in to make better decisions. And I guess also the other thing is the operations and maintenance area as well. So we have a 24/7 control room, obviously, that's constantly monitoring the network. How do we make sure they've got good forecasting, advanced forecasting systems in place so they know what's about to happen, and when something does happen, they can quickly understand what the cause is as well. So we've been quite unfortunate in the last few years around some major, I guess, windstorms that have happened. And again, they're all, sometimes, they can appear out of almost anything. And the quicker we can get that information to us, the better decisions we can make around, how can we potentially even isolate our network so the impact of those strong winds, doesn't have a major impact on the state as well. So.
And just to continue on that, so there's this translation of risks and the types of data sets you're looking for. And when we were speaking the other day, in one of our catch-ups, Frank, you spoke about the challenge of going from data to insights. Can you just talk a bit more about what does it really mean to translate a variety of sets of data into an insight? Because there's some takeaways, I think, for our audience in that.
Yeah, I guess definitely in the data integration space, the more diverse data sources we have, the more important things like data standards, even data quality standards, they become pretty important to us. And sometimes it doesn't matter how well you define those standards. Everyone tends to have a different interpretation of what those standards mean. We're capturing information across multiple third parties. We don't have any space information yet, but we definitely see some value in bringing that together. And I guess from our perspective, it's also about the resilience as well. How do we complement data? So when, let's say, a data feed isn't available, how can we quickly switch to another data feed if required? And I guess on the visualization side, that's an interesting challenge as well. So we spoke about some LiDAR data coming in. So we definitely, right now our 3D data is very much used in the planning and build part of the network. It's not quite there in the operations and maintenance area, and it's really about how much data can you manage as a utility as well, because as soon as you capture that data, you've got to make sure you're maintaining it. We've got assets out there that that effectively are replacing every 3 to 4 years. Especially some of the more electronic devices out there. And so how do you keep track of those changes as well? So I guess that's some of the challenge.
Yeah, we'll keep moving because I just want to make sure we've got time for broader Q&A. But Ben, I'll go to you. This question of risk and the sort of data you need, particularly in this transitioning business that REA has at the moment. What are the types of, if you like, the regional remote data sets that you think will be most valuable in this future REA model you've been talking about?
Yeah, sure. I think I'll touch on a point there, more so the risk and efficiency piece, right? So efficiency, if you think about our solar and battery business that we sort of acquired 4 years ago. But before I get there, though, I'll just touch on one thing that, it's great to see South Australia performing so well there on the renewables and Denmark just behind there in that chart. A lot of that comes down to everyone in the room, right? Putting solar and battery and making that investment into their own homes. It's something that we've done and have led for a long period of time thanks to a lot of government focus and drive, right? And that's got South Australians on board, and I think that's been a phenomenally good thing. So when I first started walking around the solar and battery business, you'd see literally guys in there with rulers measuring on screen as to how something might look based upon a rooftop, and maybe that's sort of how they do it, and they interact with the member in that way. We're quickly moving away from a lot of that sort of approach, and we have built technology which is, we haven't got to the point of taking it to another level of painting and IPing, but the reality is we have a system and solution built where we can put a bill in, we can get that rooftop, we can apply a panel of how they will look on that rooftop and do a first base design without even inspecting the property, right? And so as you start moving into remote and regional areas where you can't necessarily get to those spaces, so efficiency, and we're seeing it now, right? So the cheaper battery program, that has absolutely increased and intensified demand to a point where battery supply is going to be a challenge, right? Across the world, but more so in Australia, it's getting it in here, right? Getting the batteries in. And that's what we need. We need carbon capture to make that transition occur. But we're seeing farmers now calling us and saying, hey, look, I've got multiple properties. I want to put it on my rooftop. And can you come and have a look, kind of thing. It's like, well, you're 300 kilometres away, but if we can get the right mapping and the right geospatial capability, we can then get that information and we can work it out from there. And so that's a really good strength that we can deliver, and that only comes from really good engineering, to the point where, as before, quality engineers, and I'm talking about technology engineers ingesting the right levels of data and then being able to do that in the right way. And we end up with outcomes that our members can actually go in there and theoretically over time log in their own address and build their own solar system and pretty much hit button press. And that will be amazing when we get to that point.
I think that's a great use case. And so if we keep going on this sort of conversation of use cases, Katie, you were highlighting automation being key. You gave a great example of safety and ventilation. But of all the use cases that you're seeing, there's some great stats from the Thinking At Differently program of programs that were coming down to shortlisting, but the ones that are getting you most excited that have connection to this sector, do you want to unpack that just a bit more?
Yeah, look, I think there's absolutely no doubt of there's no shortage of incredible technology being developed by an enormous amount of very, very talented individuals. I think the thing that we often come up against is there's not enough domain experience from the customer side in terms of who are you trying to apply this technology to or for, and what's the problem you're going to solve with that technology that you've developed. So I've seen some incredible things in quantum computing. We've seen advances in sensors and the accuracy of sensors for predicting certain mineral compositions and those kinds of things. But actually the business case doesn't stack up for their deployment on our side once you start to look at how you augment that into existing technologies and how you're actually going to build that and manage that. So there's this I think we're at this kind of really interesting point where we've got so much technology at our fingertips and we keep creating more ways to collect more data, more ways to understand things more, but ultimately we haven't quite nailed, I think, exactly what is the 1, 2 or 3 use cases we're going to absolutely go after. And I think, particularly if I look at robotics, I mean, everybody's spending money on what they can automate and then what data does that need to run? But actually, what's the problem we're solving?
So what's stopping that? Because I imagine those of us are innovative types here. People like me probably come and suggest the next great idea to you, but this notion of shortlisting down to here's the nugget we've got to go after. What actually is stopping you there?
It's a bit of an unusual response from me on this, but it's why I spoke about the people, because it takes people investing time to have a conversation and a willingness to learn each other's sectors or each other's business. And that means, for us at BHP, we have to make an investment in my time and my team's time to spend time to find these things and to work through those use cases. But equally for the developers, don't come and sell. Come and be curious about what is the problem that we might need to solve on our side and spend that time together. And so these things, I think we're so used to being in a buy-sell mindset as organisations, but when it comes to deploying new technologies, it's not a buy-sell. It's an understand and invest and grow. And so you really have to, it's about thinking differently about how we're actually going to bring these things in. And so I think we do fall in that trap of not spending enough human time asking the right questions and understanding. And on our side, we've been terrible in the past at opening the doors, letting people in. You hear so many times, no, it's IP, no, it's not safe, no, that's competitive. When you really unpack things, I think for companies like BHP, we've been thinking what really is competitive and what really is something we need to close, and being more open to having those shared conversations and particularly sharing things like data sets and videos of sites, and even doing tours to give people that opportunity to understand our business so they can build the right technology for us.
I'll keep going on this line of inquiry with you, because the Andy Thomas Foundation, they've been running this conference for a number of years. In fact, it's the 18th one, and in fact, I can see Michael Davis, the chair here, but Michael's been always passionate about connecting this sector to other sectors. Katie, you're in this head role of innovation ecosystems. It's this ecosystem word for BHP. Where are the opportunities for ecosystems to clash and to come together and to pick up on this sort of, this learning and hunger to sort of understand how should this sector engage better?
Yeah, that's a two-way street, right? I mean, mining people, and I'm sure it's in other sectors, love to go to mining conferences and talk to mining people about mining things. I mean, how boring. I think what we've got to do is start to spend some time in sectors that are not the ones we come from. And so my challenge to any audience I'm with is what's the conference you've gone to, or the lunch session that you've gone to in an area that is not your domain in the last 12 months, and who did you meet? And I think it often starts that simply, is going and spending time in an area that you're not familiar with. And I think we all need to get better at that. I think there is a risk, particularly, I mean, if innovation isn't a buzzword, ecosystems is a bigger buzzword. I mean, I live in the land of buzzwords, but fundamentally, ecosystems to me, it represents something that is living and is dynamic. And so, it's taken from nature itself. And so, therefore, it is always evolving, new connections are forming, and you need to follow new leads, find new nodes, get yourself involved in things. So it comes from being active and being a participant in an ecosystem.
And if we just kind of continue from ecosystems, we're often in innovation, we're always piloting something. Frank, I'm going to go to you on in your role at looking after data and information for the assets. What's the appetite like for piloting new tech in your world, and what's got to be true for that to be a good thing?
Yeah, and look, I think, and so ElectraNet, we're obviously very invested in making sure we're doing our bit to keep electricity prices as low as possible. Obviously making sure our network is readily available as well. But I think a lot of it depends on, we spoke about the people, but having, seeking out those innovative people in the organisation as well. Because sometimes small ideas gain momentum and they turn into big ideas. And it's also finding people that can align what they're trying to achieve with what the organisation is trying to achieve. One of our mantra in asset information is about making sure whatever we do has to help someone make a better and more timely decision. So it's very easy to align to that, and just making sure your staff have enough time and skills to seek out those opportunities. So ElectraNet, we tend to partner quite a bit with small innovative companies, definitely around whether it be a classic one we've been looking at recently is we capture a lot of high resolution imagery with our assets, and how do we use image analytics to start identifying defects, and even as simple as understanding what assets are out there and confirming the assets we've got captured in our systems are actually what's out there in the field, because when you're constantly changing assets in the field, it's very hard to keep track of that change, and the more you can use technology and data and so forth to automate some of those processes, it definitely helps. So I think for me the innovation bit's about how do you get those projects that start small, align themselves with what the organisation's trying to achieve, and then gaining momentum from that. We're pretty lucky. I think our CE definitely likes to see ElectraNet as an innovation company, and I think that helps as well, right? So if you've got your executives and your CEs that are highly innovative and want to see the organisation as innovative, that definitely helps get some of that funding available as well. So.
And Ben, if we just sort of take this to REA, I know when you and I were speaking the other day, and you asked me, who's going to be in the room? What's the crowd like? And it's going to be a motley crew. We've got, probably in car analogies, given the REA's world, you've got the equivalent of, gear stick manufacturers and steering wheel manufacturers and chassis, and the analogy there is whether we've got spaceport operators, sensors and propulsion companies. What is it going to be like for you to deal with these, with this crowd here? Do we just need better use cases, one throat to choke? Is it how do you engage with this crew?
Oh, look, I think, well, first, come back to the innovation. That was an interesting question, lead in, quite good. So I always ask, one, who is the audience so that I know who I'm talking to. But, I mean, ultimately, I'd be talking to a few RA members here as well from what I saw before. The facts are we have to know what the members want. That's what we're about. So understanding what the members' needs are, what their wants are, and then making moves around that. And as I mentioned in my early address, we're part of a global mobility agency, right? So, or GMA, Global Mobility Automotive Sector. And to give context to that, we run our own innovation sessions. We're part of FIA as well, so there's drone activities and things that we're doing in that space, and we've been a recipient of drone-based grant funding to look at medical drones. Now, we partner with other clubs globally. So we look beyond South Australia and beyond Australia to do a lot of our innovation. And maybe I'll share this really quickly with you. When we launched into energy, it wasn't done in the way that we just sort of went, oh, we're going to go and do this. This is a good thing. We could keep doing solar and battery, and we could build an energy program around a small percentage of people that love looking at how much they're spending on their energy bill and everything else and making those investments. But that's not the mass market, right? 7 minutes is all that most Australians spend on energy, and that's just paying the bill, as an example. So we looked at that and we went, okay, it's not a highly interactive. Most people spend more time on their fantasy app, you know, for AFL Fantasy, than they do on energy, right? So per week, I guarantee you that. So we go, how do we get this more interactive? One, how do we make it more transparent? Because the energy sector, if you look at the member satisfaction, or what we call member satisfaction, but everyone calls NPS, it's really low, right? People don't engage with their energy companies that well. In fact, a lot of them don't like them, and they find them very gimmicky and very sales orientated to get people in through the door. So we went, okay, well, the way we can have a mass appeal is make it more transparent. So we ran RA Energy, which is now a member-owned energy platform, where you can take 5 minutes to log in and complete your switch process to us, and you get transparent wholesale pricing at a monthly fee that we charge. That monthly fee is to keep our lights on, and then we give you insights on your energy usage. That was also brought in play by AWMB in the Netherlands. Very different market on energy, very different operations to how they operate, but they were very insightful in providing us insights when we went across for an innovation session with them, and I was there presenting, and we got talking, and that became, you know, very long night sessions where they would help, you know, this is what we're doing, here's how this operates, here's how it works, completely different markets. But we took a lot of what they did and how their members responded to that. And it's safe to say our members are really responding well, you know, in this period. We've got great pricing, and they're coming on board because it's exactly what they want. And all of our member research, we do tons of member research that I look after that function. Simone will know about our research. We do a lot of it. Our members are telling us cost of living pressures are real, and energy is right up there in the area that they want us to go after and focus in on. And we're doing that. So that's how we innovate. It's what the member wants now and today, but we also know the future of energy and the convergence of motor and home, which you would have seen in our strategy, is where we're going to be playing a lot more into, right? And so we're already looking at vehicle to grid technology and vehicle to home technology and how that's going to affect overarching carbon capture and storage, because it will be in the vehicle ultimately. And those standards are changing, and that's getting better and better, as we know. And so that's the future. And so we have to be there for our members into the future, but we need to deal with the now issue. And right now, energy costs are too high, and we've got to find a way to make them more transparent and get them lower for those that are utilising energy on a high basis.
Great. I'm going to ask one quick question, and it's sort of like a 30-second answer each, and then we'll open up the mic for the floor. But yeah, we've got some folk from the Australian Space Agency, the Space Industry Association of Australia. There's a big space conference in Sydney coming up in late September, IAC, and the organisers have tried to introduce a shift to welcome organisations like yours from end user sectors. What would be your word of advice around what do you need in terms of the stories, the use cases of what this sector can do? If there's just a quick answer there, what would be the advice there? Don't look at me too worried there, Katie. Do you want to go or not?
I was just thinking I'm going to IRC. We do have a large mining aspect of IRC this year, and so you know, I'll be putting out some stuff before we get there with some of our focused problem statements for people to kind of lean into. But I would also say, in the spirit of my challenge to everyone before, IMARC, the International Mining and Resources Conference, is on in Sydney, not too far away. So if you want to have an extended holiday in Sydney and try and
hit them both, I'd really encourage you to do so, just to get that opportunity to see what the two sectors are doing.
Great. And Frank?
Yeah, I guess from our perspective, how do we keep, we spoke about integration costs and bringing that information into ElectraNet. How do you make it easy for organisations like ours to capture that information, integrate that information, and even share that information as well? So things like privacy and security are important, but transparency is just as important as well. So
Ben, what's your answer?
Yeah, well, I'll put it to you like this. We're not a hardware manufacturer of anything related to space whatsoever, so we have no interest in any of those sorts of things necessarily. In saying all of that, as I mentioned before, I've mentioned drones, I've mentioned new technologies, I've mentioned new things that will be coming and emerging. My view would be very similar to Katie mentioned before. Go into different sectors, spend time in different sectors, understand what their needs are and what their challenges are. And so you look at RA, we're a complex utility provider. There's lots of different things that we're doing. How can we do it differently? How can we do it more effective and more efficient in our operations? And how can we leverage different technology and solutions that do emerge? And so, I would say this. You saw the car up there before. It was a very old car from a long time ago. We had motorbikes when we first started. There weren't actually cars. We're now looking to EVs. We're now looking into connected data. We're now looking to all those areas and how that will play out over time, right? And so for us, anything related to data solutions that you can provide insights and give us different abilities to be more efficient and how we operate would be worthwhile.
Yeah, great. Questions, folks? And have we got a mic out here? Otherwise, I'll pass this mic out. Yeah, let's use this one. Sam, do you want to run it around? Let's go. We'll go to Bill close by first.
Bill Barrett,
Hands up. So, yep, go right.
Asia Pacific Aerospace Consultants. I'm curious for all of you, what space means in your organization. So if you actually came and thought, hey, this could be good, and you have to run it up the flagpole, how do you talk about that? Is there a shock factor? What do you mean space? Or how well known is space or the information that can come from space within your various organizations? And maybe if you could also touch upon how did you get to the way you use space data at the moment? Your story of how you got into the space game in a way.
And what we'll do, I'm going to go with your first question, then we'll give others a bit of a chance, and we might come back to your second question.
They're conjoined. They're conjoined. You can't break them apart, Byron.
Nice try, Bill. But the first question on that, what happens when you mention the word space to the exec? That's kind of another way of saying that. How well?
If I went back 5 years ago, they would have said we're not space miners because there was a big kind of asteroid development narrative that was coming out, and that's actually subdued quite a lot now as people understand the applications of space economy and space technologies differently. So I would say actually they'd be quite excited, and we actually have probably about 30 active portfolio companies now that would actually call themselves space companies. They come from the space sector, but they're actively working on mining application solutions. So it's becoming more ubiquitous in our everyday language, and I think that's taken a lot of effort in explaining the importance of understanding other sectors, and credit to those in the space sector that have given legitimacy to the space sector as a growing segment of the economy as opposed to a science and development field. So I think it's actually risen its profile.
Right, Frank, what's your take on the word space in the ElectraNet exec?
Yeah, look, I mean, ElectraNet are a fairly small organisation from a people's perspective. I think it's still pretty new. We're still not totally. We do rely on Deloitte to come and share some of their stories and where technology is, but we definitely struggle to keep track of how fast the industry is moving and the information available to us. So, yep.
It's a great question. So, space. Look, we're not jumping out of our seats like the Jetsons and going to go into RA space, right? Like that's not necessarily happening as much as I would think that would be cool. The reality is, though, there is application. There is big application, and we're seeing that with our partners in Europe in a massive way, particularly around medical drones and live cases being done now. So, for example, drone technology delivering blood to crash scenes when it's needed at a critical time when road infrastructure is not available in the way that it's congested, right? So that if we're relying upon an ambulance to get there, they're going to die, right? That type of scenario has been tested and is getting tested quite regularly. And so also mapping of droning technology, so looking at areas where there's bushfire-prone areas, particularly in insurance space. So noting where there could be challenges where if there was a bushfire, what that would do to people in that community, and knowing where vegetation needs to be culled and kicked back, right? All that matters, and so that's certainly something we watch and look at. So I've mentioned drones a lot of time because it is an area that is a natural extension in, and also when we think about how we get grant funding from different bodies and the like, they're very invested around what that technology can deliver, and particularly like take drones and even fly. It might sound crazy, but flying cars, racing in the skies, these sorts of technologies. Formula One was pretty much a provider of a lot of safety technology into motor vehicles. So that's important. Connected car data, really important, how that would map out how cars are going to operate in an autonomous way throughout cities. Road infrastructure needs to change to enable that. You're seeing that happen in the US in different areas, and that's certainly going to continue. It's not going to go away. There's already testing for large-scale truck autonomous driving in around ports of Melbourne and different areas that are happening in Australia, let alone what's happening in Europe. The thing to note for us is one of the challenges we have is our ability to influence OEMs, so car manufacturers and the like, because we're literally a taker of the vehicle, right? Particularly in the EV space and the like, it's just reality. So how do we influence in different ways matters, but all those things will change, and the data that we're going to get and the satellite technologies that exist within space to provide some of that data in real time capability, it really does matter. And I think that's the area that we're sort of focusing in on a little bit more than what we have been in the past.
Bill, we'll come back to you. I want to just jump up to the middle table here.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony Ray. Sorry, that was very loud. I wanted to challenge something Frank said, because I think it's illustrative of the problems that we have in translating space technology to real-world problems and real-world outcomes. Frank, you said you don't use any space data. I will challenge you on that, because let's say you're using forecasts of outputs of solar power stations. That's a satellite-derived product. If you're using forecasts of wind over South Australia, that's not directly a satellite product, but it's 90% satellite data. We had Ben also talking about self-driving cars and all the rest. Well, that's satellite enabled because it's relying on GPS. So I think as a community, we still have this problem of translating and reaching out to end user communities like yourselves to get you to tell the stories for us about the benefits of space technology. So not really a question, but more of a comment. Thanks.
Good point. Are there other questions? One over here. By the way, I had a similar comment and question on that, but
I think, sorry, just to add to that, it'd be interesting to see what happens if those satellites go out and the data's not there. So I think then you'll find people have a very vested interest in it. Yeah.
Well, we'll go to this question, but when we had a prep for this, I said to Katie, Ben and Frank, do you know how much space enablement is in your business today? And the other question is, but if it went away, what would happen and where are the risks? And there was, and I'm not going to identify individuals here, but there was, some of the response was, we wouldn't know. And there's something a little scary in that. We talked about risk before, so if we've got time, we might unpack that, but question up here.
Hi, I'm Scott. I'm a student at Monash. I would like to ask, it's more of a business question, but how would you sustain changes and improvements in processes within your organizations? And how would you advocate for change while the situation still appears calm and where reforms within your organizations don't seem very necessary?
And is that directed at all of our panelists?
Yeah, all of panelists. Right. Does that...
Who wants to go on that one first?
I'm happy to have a start because, my gosh, if that doesn't sum up the challenges almost every day that we face, change when people don't understand what's in it for them is incredibly, incredibly hard. And I think we could take a member approach to change management and probably get a better outcome as organisations, but you really have to spend that time on actually what's in it for me. And we often say, particularly in our space where we're talking about changes to things around ore body knowledge, which for us is understanding our mineral resources in the ground. If you're changing processes that are dull, dirty and dangerous, people are pretty keen to get involved. But if you're changing a process for the sake of changing a process, it's really hard to get people to buy into that. So, saying that something's going to just save money isn't going to necessarily invite people that have been doing something the same way for a long time. If you find the silver bullet for how to do this, please tell me. And fresh eyes as a student coming into the world, I think it's challenged the way we do it in industry. But I would just say the culture of an organisation is either favourable to empower their employees to make change, or it's not. And I won't lie, I was proud to take this panel today with these other two organisations, because I think something we have in common is empowering our people to be at the forefront of change and making the businesses we work for better. And if you're in an organisation that doesn't want that, you're probably not going to get very far.
Yeah, I'd echo exactly those sentiments. If something could be better, it's as good as broken, right? So then there's a need to improve it and get it better. In saying that, what I come back to again is, where does the member sit within everything that we do, right? And where do they sit in that position? Because I've worked for organisations, not just in RA, I've worked in Westpac Group and ANZ and banking background. And quite often you're making decisions that sometimes aren't necessarily always in the interest of the people that are going to be the end user. And it's designed around, we've got to get some cost out, we've got to get a productivity, or we've got to get a gain in those different areas, and so you'll chase that process. And the greatest buzzword of the last few years has been, how can we get AI to do this better? And to your point, it's not necessarily solving a problem, it's throwing AI at it. Why? Because we want to get the cost base down, or we want to do this or do that. And so there's this desire to make it better in that way. Where on the flip side, I've seen huge amounts of innovation and investment into areas where it's just never going to matter. And a great example of that is, everyone talks about energy optimization within the home, and we want it, and we all want it, and we want smart homes, and we can see the growth in it, and it's going to come, and it's going to come, and it's going to come. I come back to, people spend 7 minutes on energy. So when you're in your sectors and you're looking at your sector, constantly you'll look at it in the way that says, and I go to all the energy conferences, right, under the sun, Simone, as you know, and I get there and everyone's got a different opinion on how the transition will operate and how it will happen, and et cetera, and it's going to go this way and it's going to go that way, and we need to do this and this and this. Again, most people spend 7 minutes on it. So it's not about like finding the little golden nugget of technology stack that's going to be making this an amazing process, because if people don't buy into it because they see it as a utility, you're kind of wasting your time a bit on that space. They just want lower cost. And if they want lower cost, then you've got to find ways to give them the lower cost to then get them engaged in the process and how they can make that. And education, right, is really important. We focus a lot on educating our members, often at our own expense and no return. But we do that because that's what we're there for. That's our role. Yeah.
Frank, you want to take it on this one?
Yeah, I guess, yeah. I mean, there's obviously the macro level around, just keeping track of what's happening around the industry. A lot of our engineers are parts of global forums, and do understand some of the challenges other organisations and other countries are experiencing as well. But I think the other thing is also, especially as an information function, is spending time with people in the process, understanding what's really annoying them. What are they spending their time on? We spoke about the image analytics problem. We had people going through thousands of photos looking for defects. It's like, well, is there a better way to start? At least, potentially you can't fix the whole problem, but can you at least optimise the problem so they only have to look at certain data or certain stuff that might be of interest. So.
That's great. We've got 2 minutes left. I know Bill's itching for another question, but are there any more questions from the room? Yep. One up here.
I guess maybe for Kate, do you see yourself becoming an off-earth mining company? Is that in BHP's future? And if so, what sort of a hurdle to get into that phase?
I think being an off-earth engineer is more in my career development plan than maybe in BHP's future mining. I think, to be completely honest, what we're seeing is space plays a really important role in the critical mineral strategy for nations globally. And obviously, as a miner, we're interested in kind of projections around future metals. We do not have any strategy at the moment to be an asteroid miner. I'm fascinated by those that are in that space and those that are in Luxembourg just recently. Some of the stuff that people are doing is phenomenal. There's some incredible talent out there working out how to track these things and process that metal. I think if we're in a era where we are processing metals in space, the whole world's global markets for metals has changed, and that will be of interest to any organisation in the metals game. But I think we're a way off that being a changer. But in terms of the tech that's being developed, and Byron's comment about pilots, if you want to pilot tech with us, we've got plenty of earth mines to do that at.
Yeah, great. Bill, I'm going to encourage you to catch these guys afterwards, but just to wrap up, I think my encouragement to this sector, partly through this discussion, partly through the numerous conversations I've had with Katie, Ben and Frank, I think there is a burden on us around this value of space piece. And it's been banged into us through many of the space. Our good friend Enrico from the Space Agency, he is still needing to get more cut through on this. So I think the more we can communicate in terms of the value of space or the absence of it, what happens. But I think to do that through voices like the ones we've had here, we are all biased. We have a vested interest. How much better is it hearing it from organisations like we've heard today? I think the other big takeaway for me is keeping it simple. Maybe it doesn't matter sometimes if we don't mention the word space. We've heard examples of where it's space and other things, and it's the use case and the problem that's being solved. So my encouragement to us is to take Katie's advice to be curious around the adjacent sectors, not to just network with our own sector, but also to take the invitation up to go to the mining conference or the energy conference. So this has been a fascinating conversation. We could go for a long time, but please join me in thanking our three panellists. Thank you.